It's great. It's really great to be able to talk to you, Marie, especially when we, both sort of enjoy the topic around the shifting workforce and the ways that the workforce is evolving. But like, I just love you, for people that are listening that don't know you, for you to just give a quick summary of your expertise and your life so far.
Yeah, sure. So my name is obviously Marie Cuffaro. I'm the founder of Verativa Consulting. I created Verativa Consulting essentially through my years of experience in helping organizations who were traditionally recruitment organizations who wanted to diversify their services to include management consulting. So I've worked with a number of organizations where I've been part of the greenfield build or the transformation of establishing a management consulting business within a workforce solutions organization. And the reason why I set up Verativa Consulting was because my role often had a 1 to 2 year, stopgap, in the sense of the setup was done, it was going into BAU. And I have a very particular set of skills, I guess you could say, which essentially is that sort of understanding how you diversify the business, how you set up from a sales, operational, marketing, branding perspective, and felt that that could be really useful to other organizations, because a lot of recruitment businesses are looking to diversify their services. And the key thing that I consistently hear from my clients is, we know what it is, as in we know what statement of work is. We know that we need to do it because the market has changed hugely for the recruitment industry. And in order for them to do well, they need to diversify, but they don't know how to do it. And that's essentially the problem that I solve, is I give them the methodologies, the tools, the knowledge, in order to help them understand how you do it. So I essentially demystify statement of work for my clients. So yeah, typically work with recruitment businesses, hire, train, deploy, and some smaller consultancies to help them scale and grow.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, well, we've known each other a good few months now. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you. If anything, I feel like when I meet someone who I can vent openly about certain things and certain challenges, and also our alignment on solving the pain and the problem. I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of that's a lot of what you're about, isn't it? Really, it's helping businesses do things effectively. And we first connected really around this whole statement of work piece. Statement of work is part of a bigger picture, so say. It's a process. Sometimes people, it's quite interesting really, because sometimes you talk about statement of work to some people and they just think it's a document, and then you talk about statement of work to others and they actually understand, no, it's a strategic approach to delivering outcomes. Like, I'd imagine the people that you speak to, hence the role that you do and the value you bring, tend to think it's sort of the first part of what I said versus the second, and you're ultimately trying to take people from that narrow vision to a wider vision of actually understanding the value of implementing something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, statement of work means something different to everybody. And I think the most common thing I hear is most people that don't really fully understand it, most people think time and materials is a service. And I'm like, no, time and materials is the commercial way in which you engage with your client. And so it just goes to show that people understand that, they've heard the terminology, they kind of understand statement of work, but they don't really understand how it actually operates, which is why a lot of organizations that have wanted to diversify and create management consulting, they've not necessarily broken that barrier of getting beyond, deploying 5 to 10 to 20 consultants. They might go up to 40, but then they always go back down to about 10, 20 consultants. They're not really building businesses that can, extend beyond, 100 consultants deployed, multiple consultant projects where they're delivering to outcome-based solutions. And it sort of stays within that very I guess, managed services, which a lot of organizations would call dressed up staffing. And actually the higher value to solve clients' problems is actually in that outcome-based service.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you. And I think it's just why we thought this was an interesting topic to discuss and share with people, just because, you know, it's sort of, we used the words before about demystifying, you know, the actually what it all means, but actually the sort of the secret, the value that this sort of outcome-based approach can bring, you know, because it's, you know, when it's really interesting because, you know, the more I'm speaking to new contacts and reaching out, especially to service providers, recruitment businesses, you know, this model you're talking about, it's not something that's just suddenly appeared. It's been around for absolutely years, right? It's been around for when we were in nappies, you know, literally learning our ropes in our own business world. So it's not new. It's just strange how it's not been overly adopted. And, you know, I suppose keen to sort of debate that with you, because this is what I don't understand is that the value is it just because it's, you know, the traditional method of hiring and providing contingent workers, contractors, consultants to businesses is just easier that way. It's much more you know, it's much cleaner, and people have just always done it and they just never tested the water with it. Or do you think it's, you know, another reason why, you know, why we are where we are today, where you know, I would say 95% of the businesses I speak to do not really have a good, strong understanding of what value it can bring?
Yeah, I think that businesses understand the value that it brings because they've seen other organizations who have done it very well. I mean, I've been very fortunate to be part of organizations who have done it really well and have actually scaled really good businesses from it and added some great value to their businesses. You know, one of the organizations that I've worked for, you know, a lot of the clients that I go in to speak to, they mention them as a bit of a North Star of, oh, you know, how did that happen? You know, we always look at them as being, you know, great in what they've achieved. So they definitely see the value. It's just, they don't really, there's a lot of, I think one of the biggest problem is that with the way that the industry has been in the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of organizations have suffered from a revenue perspective because the market has been difficult. It really has been difficult in the recruitment industry. A lot of companies have had to downsize or change, but to do this, they kind of see it as it needs a huge investment, and it doesn't need a huge investment up front. It needs some form of investment, whether that's financially or time, and adoption and the openness to adopt change. It definitely needs those things. But it doesn't need that huge investment. It just needs the right skills and knowledge. And I think where organizations have felt like, oh, well, it's just putting contractors on a statement of work and we can sell it as a solution. And they've got people from the recruitment organization trying to run it. It doesn't necessarily land because that's not a scalable business. And there's so much to be aware of with regards to the back end of it, you know, the post-sales part of it, because as we've mentioned before, Alex, is the deal isn't done, the money isn't banked at the time you sign the SOW. It's actually delivering the piece of work. And I think that's the bit that people don't necessarily understand, is that's the important part as well. So I think there's a number of different things, and it's the appetite as well, you know, of, you know, building a business where you feel comfortable taking fixed priced, truly outcome-based solutions to your clients, because the risk is higher, but the benefit is bigger. So, you know, it's putting the right governances in place. And I think that's sometimes a little bit lost. So, and the other thing I think that some organizations have done is they've thought, okay, well, we've got, you know, really good people on the recruitment business, which they are really good people and really good at what they do, but they don't necessarily understand the statement of work. But they'll sort of come and run the businesses, and then they'll get, say, an ex-partner from a big four or from a strategy house to come in and help them to build the solution. But actually then what happens is, which I've found, is that person doesn't understand recruitment. The person on the recruitment side doesn't understand management consulting, and they're so far away from each other, so they're not really talking each other's languages, and it's not really resonating or embedding into the business. So, and I guess that's where I sit, is because I've come from recruitment background, I've then gone into management consulting, so I can help translate and kind of work as, I guess, a translator in the middle around, this is where you want to be, this is how you can get there, but actually I'll talk their language as to how they get there and take them on the journey. So I think that's some of the problems as well.
Yeah, definitely. I must admit, I've seen, I think, the discussions I've been having recently also come down to, I think, people's fear and worry about some of the compliance risk and challenges of adopting and changing the model as well, which again, I think is, I feel like there's a lot of myths around an outcome-based model and delivering around it, because it's not as widely used as traditional recruitment. But of course, there are more risks with creating an outcome-based business. The IR35 piece comes into angle, right? You've got to make sure that you're taking accountability correctly, and that the client fully understands what that means. But it's actually not as difficult as you think. It really is just, as you say, it's actually just making sure that we can educate. And I think this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this and share it, is that we could almost call it a demystifying of the myths, of what it is. Because to your point, what you just said, there's one, and I think, when you speak to businesses about compliance and the impact of that, do you feel that businesses truly understand that part of it as well, or just don't know that actually implementing something different means I've got to change my process around how we're engaging with our client?
So I'd say organizations where, say, for example, search businesses who are predominantly permanent, recruitment, essentially, they're probably a little bit less understanding of the processes and so forth. But organizations who have got well-established interim and contract businesses, it's not far from a compliance perspective, and to a certain degree, the governance perspective, it's not too different, because any recruitment company that's providing, contract services, they need to be fully understandable of things like IR35. They need to be fully understandable of the compliance processes and the risks, governance that's around that. So it's actually not too far away from it. I think where doing statement of work takes it to the next level is it's the governance around the service that you're providing, not necessarily the individuals as such. So that's the bit that is the learning curve, but it's learnable. It's not, it's not difficult to learn. So I think it depends the type of organization that you are.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest challenges is also demonstrating to the recruitment businesses or service providers of what the actual return on investment is as well, because that's half the problem. Is that when I speak to some businesses, it's a case of like, well, okay, great, but I've got no idea how to justify and understand what benefits I'm going to gain from it. I understand them, but I tangibly don't know. Like when you speak to recruitment businesses who have that mindset, because I'm sure you do, how do you tackle that? Like what's the approach you use to try and get them to understand the benefits? Now you might go through that discovery and find there might not be as many benefits for them, right? But it's still trying to get to that point of understanding them.
And I mean, fundamentally, there's a financial benefit. So, the margins are more favorable, but for reason, because you're not just providing a person and the client is going to manage that person. You are providing a solution. So there is a reason why the margins are more attractive. But then there's also the element of, I mean, I'm from recruitment. I loved recruitment. It was great and had a great time doing it. But I think after, being a number of years in the recruitment industry, I wanted to learn different things, because it did become, the same process, over and over and over again. And ultimately and I found it really interesting starting to learn management consulting, because no problem is the same, no client is the same, no solution is the same. Everything, every engagement that you do, whilst the processes can be similar, every conversation is different, and that's really exciting. And there's also the point of, the process of getting to a point of an opportunity. So therefore you're gaining leads, having initial conversations with clients about, what they need. That's the same process as it is in recruitment, except that part of the process could, instead of in recruitment, could lead to 1 or 2 headcount. You could be doing the same actions to get there, and actually it could lead to a 10-person engagement delivering a program over the course of 2 years, which why would you not do the same actions to get to gain a better benefit, from a financial perspective, individually as a recruiter? So there's that element of it. And also, I think with MSPs and RPOs have been around for many, 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 many years now. And they do have a place. Ultimately, they manage processes and they streamline processes. They save clients a lot of money. However, they do have rules in place which make it very difficult for recruiters to provide their clients with the best service. I think that I'm probably going to speak out of turn and get a lot of abuse for this, but I think the most ridiculous rule I've ever heard from an MSP and an RPO is when a client has an open role, you can't talk to them. That would be the time that you should be talking to them, when they have an open role. And even those things, I think that's where I started to think, right, I need to think about something other than recruitment here, because it just seems bonkers with the way that it's going. But the good thing with management consulting is that you're talking directly to the client. You're understanding what the client needs. You're understanding what problems you can solve to your client. So, it's that direct engagement with the clients that I really enjoyed. And then there's also the fact that recruitment solves about that much of a client's problem. Whereas actually, if you're solving their business problems through providing a solution with an outcome, you're solving that much more of a problem of theirs. So therefore, you're becoming more engaged with your client and more involved with your client. So your relationship with your client is better. So
and the value you can bring to your client is like, it's insurmountable compared to putting, you may have really good, strong, candidates within your pipeline you provide, but then you're handing the accountability over to those people. You're actually handing your reputation of your business to someone who's going in as a contractor, and they're representing you, because if they perform badly, that will come back to you, right? Regardless of the fact that you're not actually physically accountable for making the outcome of what they're trying to achieve, but you are, because you're the one who put them in there. So, I just to go back to your point though about the managed service provider, I absolutely agree with you, right? When you look at the history of the managed service provision, I was involved in running managed services for an old company, and the fact that back in those days, it was very much built on the fact that you're going into large clients that have a large supply chain that is uncontrollable and unmanageable, and margins all over the place. And the whole purpose of day one, right, was, let's bring in an external service who could help us manage that supply chain, act as an external procurement team for recruitment, and put some governance in place, because we really need it, right? And absolutely brilliant, and it's still done today, right? But businesses are now a lot more savvy of those things, right? And also, there's only so much you can do. And if I reflect back to those days of managing the managed service provider, we had so many recruitment businesses that didn't want to work with a managed service provision, because like, if I can't speak to the client, what am I doing? Why does a managed service provider have to do my management consulting piece, which is actually really, really valuable for you? So that's where it splits from a service level perspective, because technically the managed service provider is acting as a management consultant, but they're not, because they're not accountable for the delivery, because the recruiter is accountable for the delivery. But actually, because of that relationship, it's not the recruiter accountable for the delivery, it's the actual contractor. So you've got this chain. Whereas actually, if you take that outcome-based model and pull those things together, suddenly there's only one throat to choke, and that's the service provider, the management consultancy, the team that is actually delivering it. And I just think that to me, when I run those two scenarios through my head, it's just like, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. But because it's not traditional, and because it's not, you can't just suddenly implement something like that when you've had a supply chain of 100 suppliers, can you? So there is a big transition phase for clients who don't use this type of model with their supply chain to actually doing it as well. Sorry, so I just wanted to back you up. You weren't saying something out of turn. I do agree.
Yeah, I mean, I do it. There is, as you say, there is a place for MSPs and RPAs, and
exactly.
they provide a great service. It's just, it becomes more about the transaction versus, actually having, because recruitment's about people ultimately. And somehow the MSP model is taking the human element out of it, and it's become about a process versus the people. So it's a bit of an oxymoron in itself, but again, it's a needed service.
Yeah. 100%, and will always be. It's just finding the right flex of, and I can see why, some of these, because I suppose this is also one of the challenges that you see when you speak to businesses, and I see as well, is that because ex recruitment business is focused so solely on one revenue stream, right? You can't just suddenly remove that revenue stream and focus on something else. That's always going to be a revenue stream, but if you don't add different diversifications to your model, you are going to stick stale, right? You aren't going to be able to offer the flexibility, because I've seen it, and I'm sure you do, is that you can, as a recruitment business, you can scale up so much with a client, but then you hit a ceiling because you've only got a certain amount of candidates or a certain niche that you work in. So where do you take that next? How do you take it next? Well, what do I do as a recruitment business? Well, we can set up a separate division that focuses on a different industry and start building that up, right? But that's a tough game, because you're building something from scratch. Well, actually, what about if I evolved this service and actually provided it in a different layer? Because I am going to have clients that do just want the recruitment person, and they want to take accountability of the management of those people themselves. They're comfortable with that. But there are a number of growing clients that I speak to that are now really pushing hard to say, actually, I'm too busy. I don't have the time to deal with it. And in fact, you're the expert. So why should I be managing these people? So that at least you have a multi-model to offer businesses versus either one or the other. What do you think? Does that make sense, or is it completely?
It does. It makes complete sense, because ultimately as well, budgets allow for different types of services. Clients have a certain amount of budget on their OPEX, and they have budget on their CAPEX. And CAPEX is usually aligned to change and transformation and program delivery. OPEX is normally attributed to more sort of BAU. So, ultimately, majority of recruitment falls within the OPEX budget. And so suppliers obviously only have access to a certain amount of budget. So why would you not want to create a solution where it accesses another bucket of a budget that you wouldn't have access to ordinarily? There's also, if I think about hire, train, deploy organizations, for example, they're starting to diversify as well. They know there is some really amazing hire, train, deploy organizations that are staying true to themselves, but there are some now that are diversifying because they've realized that actually, with us providing hire, train, deploy, we've only got access to about 1% of that client's budget, but they have the platform and the ability to actually deliver to providing solutions to problems. So it's just about how can they diversify, because they already have the opportunity to access at least 30% more budget from their clients, because they have the route to entry already. So they're starting to diversify. It's the same with recruitment. You only have access to a certain percentage of your client's budget, but by providing another service, you're actually accessing more. And reiterating, you're becoming more sticky with your clients because you're solving more of their problems. So therefore, they're more likely to engage. And you've already got a good reputation. You know, they already have good reputations for quality and service. So why not extend that good reputation of quality and service to another service?
Yeah, 100% with you on that. You know, it's you know, we absolutely love talking about pain and problems, but it is really about understanding, you know, that client need and their challenge. And I think, you know, if you can, because it is all, well, for me and you, because we have discussed this before, it is about solving pain and challenges for your clients, right? Yours is obviously for the recruitment businesses and firms that you work with, but ultimately they're solving problems for their clients. And you know, one of the big challenges I see with people adopting or changing this is actually around the classification, and the challenge that businesses face with actually understanding it, because they go down a specific route. But because the businesses supporting them don't necessarily have the solutions or understanding to be able to deal with that, no one solves it, and everyone stays in the normal process, you know, and everyone carries on paying over the odds for a PAY resource, when actually, if you look at their business model, they're actually delivering a more of an outcome-based solution, or they have the ability to, but no one's told them how to do it because they're working with a recruitment business that doesn't understand that model. So sorry, I was sort of going on a bit of a tangent there, but it just sort of like, it all sort of comes in together, and doesn't it? It's not just because, you know, a recruitment business hasn't adopted the model. It's also because of the client's understanding and knowledge of what is actually out there, and one can't happen without the other.
No, exactly. And I think that's a really good point, because I think, you know, when we think, you know, the industry always has trends of, you know, problems or successes, right? And I think one of the things that end clients are looking at now is, you know, I guess it's derived from IR35, is the cost of putting every third-party contractor consultant or independent contractor or consultant on a PAYE model is costing them a huge amount of money. So that is now a pain point for a customer and for an end client. So, you know, how can suppliers help their customers and their clients with that problem, and help them with that problem, but not put them at any risk at the same time? So, you know, I think that's definitely something that's a huge, I guess, a huge talking point at the moment for end clients.
Definitely. I think a lot of it does sort of roll into similar veins. Like, what's your viewpoint on the biggest challenges you see where you've seen companies try to adopt this type of model? And when I say businesses, I'm obviously talking about recruitment businesses. Like the businesses that you work with, are they generally ones that come to you and say that we want to change, or do you see in the market where you've seen people try to implement it without really knowing what to do, and they've made a hash of it? Like, where is it? Do you find that tends to be more the case, where it's like, let's do this, and actually you've done a bad job of it, so it's not worked, so they've forgotten about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of businesses out there who have the most amazing platform to be able to build a management consulting practice as part of their services. But there's probably been a handful that have done it amazingly well and have actually built, you know, quite, I wouldn't say large, because if it's management consulting, when you say large, you're comparing to EY, Deloitte's, Project One, those size of organizations. But for a workforce solutions business, they have built, you know, large businesses, and they've been very successful in it. But there's a lot of recruitment, like traditionally recruitment businesses, that have tried to do this, and they haven't really been able to go beyond that glass ceiling of 50 consultants deployed. It sort of gets up there and goes back down, gets up there and goes back down. And I think some of that is around strategic account management. Some of that is around not necessarily having the, I guess, the right things in place in order to actually provide full solutions. So they'll do more sort of managed service, which is what some people would call dressed up staffing. Whereas, there's a lot of volume in that. Body shopping. Yeah. And there's a lot of volume in that for sure. But the one thing you need to be careful around that is what service are you wrapping around that holds up to the client and procurement, because procurement are getting very savvy around recruitment companies that are spinning off, SOW businesses, and they're charging more to the client, but they're not actually really providing a service. They are just providing people on a statement of work and body shopping. And that's where some organizations haven't really understood that you need to be providing a service to that client. And it's what do you wrap around that team of 2 or 3, consultants that adds value to that client other than they're delivering a piece of work. So I think that's also where it kind of becomes a bit stagnant. And, that's what I do. I sort of teach them how they can actually provide a solution to a client that has a service, and that stands up to procurement, and procurement see the value in it, because even though obviously it's more expensive than the recruitment, it's still probably commercially more viable than a big 4 or strategy house costs. So, and it's also more tailor-made. And I think that's where sometimes maybe these organizations don't understand the real true value of what they're providing, because the traditional consulting model, if we're thinking about the big 4, there'll always be a need for them. Clients have to work with them. They have to be engaged in a lot of programs. But clients are also becoming a little bit more savvy. They want to have more transparency in the projects that are being delivered. They want to be more involved and more engaged, and they want to have more tailor-made solutions. And that's what smaller, medium-sized consultancies can provide. So actually, these recruitment companies that are diversifying their services, they fit within that. They can fit within that sort of sector of providing really, truly tailor-made solutions to that client. So it's not necessarily seeing where you fit, and you're maybe selling the wrong thing to your clients.
Yeah, agreed. And it's understanding the pain that client's going through. Challenges, because if you're savvy and you're supplying it to a client and they're asking, right, I've got a job description, we're running a project, I need X person to come in and help us within that project. And rather than going, yeah, great, I'll get you some CVs, it's like, oh, hold on a minute, take a step back here a minute, and let's actually, what is it you're trying to solve? What outcome are you trying to drive by bringing this person in? And even just asking that one question instead of just defaulting to the job description and the requirements and experience and all those things, it suddenly changes the mindset of that business to start to think, well, hold on a minute, what do you mean I just need a person? It's like, well, no, you don't. It's not, you're obviously driving an outcome. Now, if you're replacing someone on a maternity cover role or something for short term, understandable. PAY is probably the best model. Absolutely. But I think there's always, I think that's also where where I see businesses fall down, is just stop, think, and try to understand what pain the client is going through and what they're trying to solve. And if you just take some time to think about that, you might actually find out there's more opportunity than just putting a person on the seat. But that's the management consulting mindset you need to have, right? If you're running a management consulting business as part of a recruitment business and you're not thinking like that, that's where those challenges, I would say, probably come up.
Agreed. Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. Well, I've realised that the problem with me and you, Marie, is I can talk to you for pretty much all day long, really. And we haven't even talked about personal life that we normally do. So, but look, I think such valuable knowledge, and it's not just about knowledge to the recruitment business. It is knowledge to the client base too, because the client base don't necessarily understand the opportunities that are there for them, that are able to work for. So thanks for sharing your insights. We probably could do 2 or 3 more of these sessions, to be honest with you. But it's been great. Anything else that you think I've missed that you wanted to add in before we say sayonara?
No, I think that's covered everything, if I'm honest with you. I think we've had a good discussion. I agree with you. We could go on for another hour, to be honest with you, but maybe part 2.
But you've got outcomes to deliver, haven't you, Marie? That's the thing. You've got to go and deliver the outcomes that you're accountable for.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
Lovely. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Alex. Appreciate your time.